Welcome to the Musar Torah podcast for Parshas Shoftim. Join us as we explore the weekly Parsha, uncovering valuable insights and striving to become the best versions of ourselves through Musar teachings. This week's Parsha lays out the laws governing a Jewish king. Among them sits a verse whose structure is easy to read past without noticing anything unusual. Levilti rum levavo me'achav ulevilti sur min ha-mitzvah yamin usmol. Thus he will not act haughty toward his fellows or deviate from the instruction to the right or to the left. That's Perek Yud Zayin Pasuk Chaf. Two instructions sit inside this single pasuk. The king must not become haughty over his fellow Jews, and the king must not veer from the mitzvos, neither to the left nor to the right. The Torah joins them together with a single letter Vav, binding them into one continuous thought, rather than presenting them as two separate warnings. Rav Yisrael Meir Druk Shlita asks the question this structure demands. What does arrogance have to do with strict, unwavering adherence to a mitzvah? These seem like two unrelated character traits, one about humility and the other about halachic precision. Why does the Torah connect them with a vav as though one flows directly from the other? Rav Druk answers with a parable from the Dubno Maggid. In earlier times, merchants would travel to large trade fairs to purchase goods they would later resell in their hometowns. Some merchants bought on credit, loading their wagons with large quantities of merchandise without paying anything up front. Others bought only according to the cash they actually had on hand, even if that meant returning home with far less. To anyone watching from outside, the merchant with the overflowing wagon looked like the greater success. A full wagon reads as an accomplishment. An outsider glancing at the two travelers would assume that the first had triumphed and the second had settled for less. However, the truth runs in the opposite direction. The merchant with the full wagon carries something the modest merchant does not, a massive debt, along with the constant worry of whether he will be able to repay it. Every mile of the journey home, that worry travels with him. Will the goods sell quickly enough? Will the profit cover what he owes? His wagon is heavier, but so is what waits for him once he arrives back home. The second merchant, the one who seems to have accomplished less, carries nothing but what belongs to him outright. His load is lighter because his obligations are lighter as well. Picture the two merchants pulling into town on the same afternoon. The crowd gathers around the fuller wagon, admiring its owner, assuming his trip was the more successful one. Nobody in that crowd sees the promissory notes tucked away, or the sleepless nights that are still ahead of him. Appearance and reality have quietly switched places. The Maggid applies this directly to the Melech. The Torah instructs the king not to be arrogant over his people, and the reason lies in exactly what his position represents. His elevated status and honor exist only because of his royal position, and that very status is precisely what generates his added responsibility, greater than that of anyone else in the nation. A king's obligations to Hashem grow in direct proportion to his grandeur. The wagon may be full, the honor, the authority, the deference of an entire nation. However, a debt travels alongside that fullness, a debt measured in accountability rather than currency. His position is not a license for arrogance. It is a summons to even greater vigilance, keeping Hashem's mitzvos, precisely because so much has been entrusted to him. This is why the Torah joins the two commandments with one vav. Recognizing the weight of his obligation is what protects the king from haughtiness. He carries more, so he owes more. There is nothing in that arrangement to feel proud of. Rav Druk relates that his chavrusa, Rav Chaim Kanievsky Zecher Levracha, would tell a story about his uncle, the Chazon Ish. Someone once approached the Chazon Ish and asked him directly, "Do you realize that you are the Gadol Hador, the leading Torah authority of the generation?" The Chazon Ish answered simply that he did know that. Then he added something remarkable. Had someone else occupied his position, that person would have made far greater use of it than he had. Notice what the Chazon Ish did not say. He did not deny his stature, and he did not deflect the question with false modesty, the kind of response that often sounds humble but actually avoids the question entirely. He acknowledged the position plainly, without hesitation. What followed the acknowledgement was the real lesson, an honest reckoning with how much more could have been accomplished from that same vantage point. Someone else standing in his shoes with his knowledge and his following might have reached further, taught more, influenced more lives. The greater the position, the greater the standard by which he measured himself against it. This is precisely the Dubin Maggid's merchant dressed in different clothing. The Chazon Ish's wagon was full to a degree few in history can claim. Rather than treating that fullness as a trophy, he treated it as an open debt, one he wasn't certain he had fully repaid. The same principle applies to us, the Am HaNivchar, the chosen nation. Whatever platform Hashem has entrusted to us, whether it is a position of communal influence, a role within our family, a skill, a following, or simply the trust other people place in us, comes bundled with a debt of responsibility proportional to its size. This week, let's all identify one area where Hashem has given us a fuller wagon than we typically acknowledge. It might be a talent we take for granted, an audience that listens to us, or a position of trust we occupy without thinking much about it. Rather than measuring that fullness as an achievement to feel proud of, let's ask the harder question the Chazon Ish modeled. Given what we have been entrusted with, are we living up to the responsibility that comes with it? Let's pick one concrete way to close that gap this week. A full wagon looks like success from the outside, but it arrives with a debt attached. The Torah warns the king against haughtiness in the same breath that it demands his unwavering adherence to mitzvos, because true recognition of a lofty position brings humility, not pride. Every one of us carries some version of that fuller wagon. Our task is not to admire it, but to repay what it demands of us. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Musar Torah podcast. May we all merit to carry our own wagons with the humility and responsibility they deserve. Have a good Shabbos.